My name is Rachel Monroe. I'm 32 years old, and until last week I believed I understood my place in my family. Not loved the most, not favored, but at least included. I was wrong. Last Tuesday, I walked into my grandfather's house thinking I was attending a routine family legal meeting. Paperwork, signatures, a polite argument over percentages maybe. Instead, I walked into a room filled with nearly 50 relatives. Absolute silence, phones already raised, and a plan that had been quietly forming for decades. A plan that required me to be humiliated, erased, and blamed. All in one afternoon. But I didn't know that yet. The house sat at the end of a winding cul-de-sac in a quiet suburb outside Charlotte, North Carolina. Red brick, white columns, perfect hedges trimmed so precisely they looked artificial. Old money, old secrets. As I turned into the driveway, my stomach tightened immediately. Cars were everywhere. SUVs belonging to cousins I barely spoke to anymore. Luxury sedans my aunts only drove on special occasions. One unfamiliar car with an out-of-state plate. That alone should have been my warning. My family never showed up early. They never showed up prepared. And they never showed up together unless something was wrong. I sat in my car for a moment longer than necessary, hands resting on the steering wheel, listening to the faint ticking of the engine as it cooled. My reflection stared back at me in the windshield. Navy blazer, neutral makeup, hair pulled back clean, professional, controlled, unthreatening. That had been my survival strategy my entire life. Growing up, I learned very early that attention in my family was a limited resource, and I wasn't the one they invested in. My younger brother Evan was loud, charming, always performing. If he laughed, the room laughed. If he failed, excuses appeared instantly. He's creative, my mother would say. He's sensitive, my father would add. When Evan stayed up all night playing games, it was passion. When I stayed up all night studying, it was expected. Straight A's earned a nod. Second place in a science fair earned silence. First place earned a, "That's nice, honey," before the conversation shifted back to Evan. I learned not to expect praise. I learned to be useful instead. I became the dependable one, the calm one, the one who didn't need much. And because I didn't ask, they assumed I didn't need. The front door to my grandfather's house was already open when I stepped out of the car. That was strange, too. Normally, it stayed shut until guests arrived, like a formality, like control. Voices drifted from inside, low and contained, like people whispering in a hospital hallway. As soon as I crossed the threshold, the voices stopped, every single one of them. The silence was immediate and heavy, like walking into a room after a fight. I followed the hallway toward the study at the back of the house, my heels clicking too loudly against the hardwood floor. With every step, the pressure in my chest increased, and then I saw them. Rows of relatives lined the walls of the study, some standing, some seated, all staring. No smiles, no greetings, no warmth, just eyes, nearly 50 of them. My grandfather, William Monroe, sat at the head of the long oak table, his cane resting between his knees, hands folded over the polished handle. 86 years old, still sharp, still powerful. He didn't stand. He didn't smile. He simply watched me. For a brief second, something flickered across his face. Not anger, not pride, regret. Then it vanished, replaced by something unreadable. To his right sat Mr. Caldwell, the family attorney, legal pad open, pen poised, calm, detached. That was my first real warning. My father, David Monroe, stood when I reached the table. He didn't hug me, didn't even say my name. He slid a thick manila folder across the polished wood toward me. It stopped inches from my hands. "This is the proof," he said. His voice was cold, not angry, not emotional, just final. "We want everything back." I frowned, genuinely confused. Back? From what? Before he could answer, my brother moved. Fast. Evan stepped forward and yanked my phone straight out of my hand. At the same time, my wallet vanished from my other pocket. The movement was practiced, efficient, like they'd rehearsed it. "Hey," I said, forcing my voice steady, "give that back." No one intervened, not my mother, not my aunts, not my grandfather. Evan grinned, flipping my phone over in his hand. "Relax, Rachel," he said. "We just need to make sure you're not hiding anything." The red recording light blinked on. He had started a live stream. 3 weeks earlier, when Evan had called me at work, I should have trusted my instincts. I was buried in client files, juggling deadlines, when his name flashed across my screen. I hesitated before answering. Evan only called when he wanted money. Or attention. "Big family news," he said the moment I picked up, voice buzzing with excitement. I leaned back in my chair. "What kind of news?" "Estate stuff. Grandpa and Dad are calling a full family meeting. Everyone's invited. Lawyer, too." The lawyer. That word settled heavy in my chest. "When?" I asked. 3 weeks. Grandpa's house." "Why wasn't I told directly?" I asked. Evan laughed. "Dad said it's supposed to be formal. Clearing things up." Clearing things up. Then casually, like it meant nothing at all, he added, "Oh, and Dad wants you to bring your birth certificate." My fingers froze above the keyboard. "My birth certificate?" "Yeah," he said. "For the records. Again." Again. My mother had always claimed the original was destroyed in a flood when I was little. Everything ruined, she'd said, but I'd checked. There was no flood, no insurance claim, no county record, just another missing piece of my identity. "Why does he need it again?" I asked. "Paper trails," Evan said. "Grandpa's old." Then his voice dropped slightly. "Don't tell anyone I mentioned it. Just act surprised." That was when unease turned into dread. Back in the study, Evan raised my phone higher, angling the camera toward my face. "Family meeting going nuclear," he murmured to his viewers. "Stay tuned." I glanced at the screen. The viewer count was climbing fast. My father opened the folder and pulled out the top document. "DNA test results," he said. "Conclusive." The room hummed with whispers. "You're not biologically ours." The words landed heavy, but not shocking. Some part of me had always felt slightly out of place. "We raised you," he continued, "fed you, educated you, paid for everything." He flipped the page. "We want reimbursement." I stared at the number. $400,000. My mouth went dry. "You're saying I owe you money for raising me?" "That's correct," my mother said sharply, arms crossed. I turned to her. She wouldn't meet my eyes. "You sign a waiver today," my father said, "or you pay us back." "And if I don't?" I asked quietly. He leaned forward, lowering his voice. "I still have connections at your firm." That was the moment everything clicked. This wasn't about money. This was about control. Evan zoomed the camera closer. "Chat's losing it," he whispered. "This is insane." Phones around the room lifted higher. No one stopped it. No one defended me. And then, someone in the back of the room stood up. A man I didn't recognize. Tall, silver-haired, calm. He began clapping. Slowly, deliberately. Clap, clap, clap. The sound echoed through the study, cutting through the murmurs, freezing everyone in place. He stepped forward, and every instinct in my body screamed that nothing in my life would ever be the same again. Rachel Monroe. That's still my name. But in that room, at that moment, it felt like they were trying to erase it. The clapping stopped. Not because the man was finished, but because everyone else had stopped breathing. The stranger stood near the back of the study, hands lowering slowly to his sides, posture relaxed in a way that didn't match the tension choking the room. He wasn't smiling now. He wasn't angry either. He looked patient, like someone who knew exactly how this was going to end. My brother Evan was the first to speak, because of course he was. Who are you?" he asked, camera still raised, chat still scrolling, numbers ticking upward like a heartbeat on a monitor. The stranger took one more step forward. "My name is Daniel Cross," he said calmly. "I was invited here as an observer." My father's jaw tightened. "We didn't invite you," he snapped. Daniel tilted his head slightly, not offended, not defensive. "No," he said, "you didn't." He turned his gaze toward the attorney. "But you did." Every eye in the room snapped to Mr. Caldwell. The lawyer shifted in his seat, cleared his throat, then nodded once, reluctantly. "Mr. Cross is connected to the trust," he said carefully. That word again, trust. My grandfather's hand tightened around the handle of his cane. I heard the wood creak faintly under the pressure. "Why is he here?" my mother demanded. Daniel answered before anyone else could. "Because this meeting was never about reimbursement," he said evenly, "and deep down, every single one of you knows that." The room erupted into murmurs. Phones lifted higher. Evan's camera zoomed in, catching every reaction, every twitch of panic, every flicker of guilt. "Chat's saying this is scripted," Evan muttered. "Guys, I swear this is real." I hadn't moved. I was still standing exactly where I'd been when my phone was taken from me, my wallet tossed aside like an afterthought. My heart was pounding, but my mind felt strangely clear. When you're humiliated long enough, you stop feeling shock. You start observing. My father straightened his shoulders, reclaiming his authority. "This is a private family matter," he said sharply. "You need to leave." Daniel smiled just slightly. "Oh, I will," he said. "Eventually." Then he looked directly at me, but not before the truth does. My mother took a step forward, voice sharp, rehearsed. "Rachel," she said, using my name like a tool, "you need to understand how generous we've been." Generous. That word hit something deep. "You think we wanted this?" she continued. "We took you in. We sacrificed." I laughed. It slipped out before I could stop it. A short, hollow sound. "Sacrificed?" I repeated quietly. She glared at me. "You were given a life," she snapped. "You could have ended up anywhere." Evan angled the camera closer to my face. "Say it again," he whispered. "People love when it gets emotional." I turned toward him slowly. "Turn it off," I said. He grinned wider. "No way, this is history." My father slammed his hand against the table. "Enough," he barked. "Rachel, sign the waiver." He pushed a document toward me. I didn't touch it. "Or what?" I asked. He leaned closer. "Or we destroy you professionally," he said quietly. "You think your firm will back you when they hear you're not even family?" Not even family. The room felt smaller. The walls pressed in. And still, no one defended me. That silence was louder than any accusation. Daniel cleared his throat, softly, deliberately. "You're making a mistake," he said. My father scoffed. "Stay out of this." Daniel didn't raise his voice. "You demanded repayment for raising a child," he said. "A child you were paid to raise." The air shifted. "What did you just say?" my mother hissed. Daniel reached into his jacket and removed a slim folder. Not thick, not dramatic, precise. "Monthly transfers," he said, placing it on the table. "Over 30 years. My grandfather's head snapped up. "No," he whispered. Daniel met his gaze for the first time. "Yes." The attorney swallowed hard. Evan's livestream chat exploded. "What transfers?" my father demanded. Daniel opened the folder. "Funds deposited directly into accounts held by David and Susan Monroe," he said, "labeled as guardianship support." My mother's face went pale. "That's a lie," she said quickly. Daniel slid the folder closer to me. "Would you like to see?" My hands shook as I reached for it. Bank statements, dates, amounts every month, for decades. Not charity, not generosity, a contract. "You were paid," I said softly. My father stood abruptly. That money was compensation, he snapped, for the burden. The word hit harder than anything else. Burden. I looked at my grandfather. He hadn't moved, hadn't spoken, but his eyes were glassy now, fixed on the table, like he was staring at something he'd spent a lifetime pretending wasn't there. Daniel continued. The agreement stipulated silence, he said, until Rachel turned 32. My heart skipped. That's today, Evan murmured, reading something off my phone screen. He frowned. There's an email here, he said, from the trust administrator. My father lunged for the phone. Evan pulled it back instinctively. Wait, he said, scrolling. It says the payments end today. The room went dead silent. My mother's lips trembled. That's not, she started. Daniel raised a hand gently. It is. Then he turned toward me. Rachel, he said, there's more. My grandfather finally spoke. His voice was thin, shaking. We had an agreement, he said. Daniel nodded. You did, he replied, and you broke the spirit of it. My grandfather closed his eyes. I'd never seen him look small before. Daniel reached back into his folder and removed a single envelope. Yellowed, carefully preserved. This was meant for you, he said, holding it out to me. My name was written on the front in handwriting I didn't recognize, but somehow knew. I took it. The room blurred. I opened it slowly and began to read. My sweet Rachel. If you're reading this, then I couldn't stay. I need you to know something before anyone else tells you their version of the story. You were wanted. You were loved. You were never an accident. My breath hitched. I was scared. I was sick. And I didn't fight hard enough. That's on me. Telling you the truth was supposed to happen sooner, but fear won. Please don't let anyone convince you that you owe them your existence. You owe no one your life. Live freely, love deeply, and forgive yourself for surviving. Mom. My knees nearly buckled. Daniel stepped closer, just enough to steady me without touching. She passed when you were very young, he said softly. She trusted the wrong people. My mother let out a sound that was half sob, half scream. This is manipulation, she cried. You're poisoning her. Daniel didn't respond. He let the truth sit. The livestream chat was moving too fast to read now. This is abuse. Those parents are monsters. Get her out of there. Evan stared at the screen, his grin gone. This isn't going the way I thought, he muttered. My father backed away from the table. This meeting is over, he said weakly. No, Daniel replied. It's finished. I looked around the room, at the faces that had watched me be dismantled, at the people who'd stayed silent. I'm leaving, I said. No one stopped me. I walked to the door. This time, the silence followed me out. Outside, the air felt different, lighter, like I could breathe for the first time. Behind me, the house remained still. No apologies, no explanations, just the sound of something collapsing inward. I didn't look back. I didn't drive away right away. I sat in my car at the end of the long, curved driveway, hands resting on the steering wheel, engine off, headlights dark. The house loomed behind me, all glass and stone and quiet wealth, unchanged on the outside. Inside, everything was burning. I could feel it. My chest felt hollow, like someone had scooped something essential out of me and left the rest intact. Not pain exactly, not yet. Shock had a way of numbing everything first. My phone buzzed. Once, then again, then nonstop. Unknown numbers, missed calls, notifications piling on top of each other. I didn't look. Instead, I stared straight ahead and let myself remember something small. The smell of coffee in my first apartment, the hum of traffic outside the window, the feeling of locking my door at night and knowing it was mine. That life hadn't been built by them. It had been built in spite of them. The engine finally turned over with a low growl, and I drove away. By the time I reached my apartment, the world already knew. The live stream had been clipped, reposted, dissected. The internet had done what it always does when presented with a clear villain and a sympathetic target. It chose sides. I dropped my bag on the floor, kicked off my shoes, and collapsed onto the couch. My phone lay face down on the coffee table, vibrating like it was alive. Eventually, I picked it up. Hundreds of messages. Some from coworkers, some from acquaintances I barely remembered, some from total strangers. "Are you okay? That was horrific. If you need anything, call me." Then the headlines. Not major outlets yet. Blogs, commentary channels, reaction videos. Adopted daughter publicly humiliated over reimbursement demand. Family livestream backfires as decades-long financial arrangement exposed. Internet outrage after parents demand payback for raising child. I stared at the screen, detached. That wasn't me. That was a character, a symbol, a story being told without my permission. Again. My phone rang. "Daniel," I answered. "Are you somewhere safe?" he asked immediately. "Yes." "Good. I'm sorry it happened that way." I laughed softly. "No, you're not," I said. "You knew exactly how it would happen." A pause. "You're right," he admitted. I did. I didn't feel angry, just tired. "What happens now?" I asked. "That depends," he said, "on what you want." No one had ever asked me that before. Sleep came in fragments, dreams without shape. I woke up just after dawn to the sound of my phone ringing again. This time, the name on the screen made my stomach tighten, my firm. I sat up, heart racing, and answered. "Rachel," my managing partner said carefully, "have you seen the news?" "Yes." Another pause. "I want you to know," he continued, "that your position here is secure." I closed my eyes. Relief hit so hard it made me dizzy. "There are discussions," he added, "about optics, about media." "I understand," I said. "But," he continued, voice firm now, "what happened to you is wrong. Publicly, morally, legally, questionable, frankly." I exhaled slowly. "We'll need you to take some time," he said. "Let this settle." "I don't want to disappear," I replied. He chuckled softly. "I wouldn't expect you to." After the call ended, I sat in silence, letting the weight of it all land. For the first time, the consequences weren't mine to bear alone. My parents, David and Susan Monroe, went quiet. No public statements, no apologies, no explanations. Silence can be strategic, but it can also be damning. Evan wasn't quiet. He posted a follow-up video that afternoon. The title tried to be neutral. The thumbnail failed. He sat in front of the same camera, same ring light, but his confidence was gone. "I didn't know," he kept saying. "I swear I didn't know." The comments didn't care. You filmed her. You smiled. You didn't stop it. View counts spiked. So did the backlash. Sponsors pulled out one by one. Within 48 hours, his channel was demonetized. I didn't feel satisfaction, just distance. My grandfather called on the third day. I let it ring. Then voicemail, then a text. "Please, I need to explain." I didn't respond. Explanation wasn't what I needed. I needed space to decide whether he still had a place in my life. Daniel kept his promise. The trust released a statement. Short, factual, airtight. Payments, agreements, dates. No commentary, no emotion, just truth. The narrative shifted. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a long-term arrangement, enforced by silence and shame. Legal analysts weighed in. Ethicists tore it apart. One phrase kept coming up: transactional parenting. It made people furious. Good. A week later, I agreed to do one interview. One. A journalist I trusted, recommended by my firm. We met in a quiet studio, neutral lighting, no theatrics. She asked me one question. How does it feel to see your life discussed like this? I thought for a moment. Like watching a fire from across a river, I said finally. I can see it. I know it's real, but I'm not inside it anymore. She didn't interrupt. I spent my whole life believing I owed people for my existence, I continued. Turns out, I don't. The clip went viral, not because it was dramatic, because it was calm. People weren't used to that. The letter from my mother, my real mother, never left my bag. I read it every night. Each time it felt less like grief and more like permission. 3 weeks after the meeting, Daniel and I met again. Coffee, public place, normal. The trust is officially dissolved, he said. Your portion has been transferred. I nodded. Money had never been the point. And your family? I asked. He hesitated. They're facing consequences, he said carefully. Socially, legally, some inquiries. I didn't ask for details. What do you want to do now? He asked. I smiled just a little. I want to live, I said, without narrating myself for other people. He nodded. That's usually when people become dangerous, he said, in the best way. I ran into Evan once, a grocery store. He looked smaller, uncertain. He opened his mouth like he wanted to say something. I didn't wait. I walked past him. Some conversations don't deserve airtime. On a quiet Sunday morning, I finally visited my grandfather. He looked older, smaller. I failed you, he said immediately. Yes, I replied. The honesty startled him. I don't know if I can forgive you, I continued, but I won't carry your guilt for you. He nodded slowly. That was all there was. Life didn't magically become perfect. Healing isn't a montage. It's repetition, boundaries, choices, saying no without explaining. Some nights, I still felt the old ache, the fear of being disposable, but it passed faster now because it wasn't reinforced anymore. One evening, months later, I stood in my apartment packing for a move. New city, new chapter. I held the letter one last time, then placed it in a frame, not as a wound, as a beginning. I turned off the light, closed the door behind me, and walked forward. Not owed, not owned, not silent, just free. Freedom didn't arrive all at once. It didn't crash through my life like a storm or announce itself with fireworks. It arrived quietly, in fragments, in ordinary moments that felt unfamiliar because no one was watching, measuring, or waiting for me to fail. The first time I noticed it was a Tuesday. Nothing special about the day. Gray sky, light rain. The kind of morning that used to make me anxious for no reason at all. I stood in my kitchen holding a mug of coffee, staring out the window, waiting for the usual tightening in my chest. It never came. There was no voice reminding me to be grateful, no mental checklist of what I owed, no fear that I was one mistake away from being discarded. Just silence, the good kind. I moved cities at the end of summer, not dramatically. No goodbye tour, no social media announcement. I packed my life into boxes, labeled them carefully, and left without looking back. The new apartment was smaller. Sunlight spilled through the windows in the morning, warming the hardwood floors. The neighborhood was noisy in a way that felt alive. Kids shouting, buses hissing, music drifting from open windows. No one there knew my story. I liked that. I became just another woman buying groceries, learning which coffee shop burned their espresso, memorizing the rhythm of traffic lights. Ordinary. After everything, ordinary felt sacred. My parents tried to reach out, first through lawyers, then through letters, then through a carefully worded email titled Seeking Closure. I didn't open it. Closure wasn't something they could request like a meeting. Closure is something you give yourself. Daniel asked me once if I wanted him to block future attempts on my behalf. No, I said. I want to know they're trying. He raised an eyebrow. Why? Because every unanswered message reminds me that I have a choice now. The public eventually moved on. There was always another scandal, another outrage, another story to dissect. My name stopped trending. Reaction videos slowed. Think pieces were replaced by new ones. But something had shifted underneath the surface. People still recognize me sometimes, not from fame, more from familiarity. "You're the woman from that video," someone said once in line at a bookstore. "Yes," I replied. They hesitated. "I just wanted to say, you handled that with a lot of dignity." I smiled. Dignity wasn't something I'd been taught. It was something I'd claimed. I kept the letter from my mother framed on my desk, not because it made me sad, though sometimes it did, but because it anchored me. It was proof that the story I'd been told about myself wasn't the whole truth. When I read it now, I noticed things I hadn't before. The courage in her words, the fear underneath them, the love that had existed even if it hadn't survived long enough to protect me. She hadn't abandoned me. She'd lost. And that mattered. Work changed, too. I became more selective, less eager to prove myself. When people interrupted me, I stopped yielding the floor. When clients tested boundaries, I enforced them. It surprised people. Not because I was harsh, but because I was calm. Power doesn't need volume. One afternoon, my managing partner called me into his office. "You've changed," he said. I nodded. "I know." He smiled. "It suits you." For the first time, success didn't feel like survival. My grandfather passed quietly that winter. A heart attack. Quick. No drawn-out suffering. I was notified by Daniel. I attended the funeral anonymously, standing near the back, coat pulled tight around me. I listened as people spoke about his generosity, his principles, his love of family. Some of it was true, some of it wasn't. Both things can exist at the same time. Afterward, I visited his grave alone. "I hope you found peace," I said softly. "I'm still working on mine." I left without regret. Evan faded from relevance. His channel never recovered. The algorithm moved on without him. Occasionally, I'd hear about a failed comeback attempt or a defensive post that only reignited old criticism. We never spoke again, and I didn't miss him. Blood doesn't guarantee connection. Sometimes it only guarantees proximity. My parents' silence eventually turned into acceptance, or at least resignation. The messages stopped, not because they understood, but because they realized control was gone. That was enough. One night, nearly a year after everything happened, I was invited to speak at a small private event. No cameras, no live stream, just a room of people who worked in social services, advocacy, and law. They didn't ask me to relive the story. They asked me one question. What would you want people to understand about children raised under obligation? I thought for a long moment. Then I said, love that comes with an invoice isn't love. It's a leash. The room went quiet. I continued. Children don't choose to be born. They don't consent to being raised. Anything you give them while reminding them of the cost isn't generosity. It's control. Afterward, people came up to me quietly. Some cried, some thanked me, some said nothing, but their eyes said enough. That night, I understood something clearly for the first time. My story wasn't just mine anymore, and that was okay. I didn't rebuild my relationship with my parents. I didn't forgive them in the way people like to romanticize. Forgiveness, for me, wasn't reconciliation. It was release. I stopped hoping they would change, stopped imagining apologies, stopped replaying conversations that never happened. I let them remain who they were and chose who I would be instead. On my 33rd birthday, I did something simple. I took myself out to dinner, a quiet restaurant, candlelight, soft music, no guests, no speeches, no expectations. Just me, a good meal, and the strange, beautiful feeling of existing without being evaluated. I raised my glass to no one in particular. To freedom, I whispered. Later that night, standing on my balcony, city lights stretching endlessly before me, I realized something else. I hadn't survived my family. I had outgrown them. Survival is reactive. Outgrowing is intentional. Survival asks, how do I endure this? Outgrowing asks, why am I still carrying it? I set it down. The story didn't end with justice in the dramatic sense. No courtroom climax, no final confrontation, no tearful reconciliation. It ended with something quieter. A woman living a life that no longer required permission, a past acknowledged but no longer obeyed, a name spoken without flinching. Rachel Monroe. Not a burden, not an obligation, not a debt, just a person. And that was more than enough. If this story made you uncomfortable, that's because it should. This wasn't just a story about inheritance, money, or family conflict. It was a story about control disguised as love. One of the biggest lessons here is this. Bringing someone into the world is not a business transaction. Love is not a debt. Care is not an invoice. Another lesson is about silence. Everyone in that room stayed quiet while one person was publicly humiliated. And silence, especially from people with power, can be just as harmful as cruelty. If you've ever been made to feel guilty for existing, reminded of everything we did for you, or treated like love had conditions, please know this: you are not ungrateful. You were conditioned. And finally, this story reminds us that walking away is not weakness. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is stop explaining yourself to people who never intended to understand. Now I want to hear from you. Let's talk in the comments. Where are you watching from? Your country or state? I read every comment. Do you believe parents should ever expect repayment from their children? Why or why not? If you were in Rachel's place, would you have stayed silent or walked away? Your answers help others feel less alone, and they help this channel grow. If this story made you think, made you emotional, or felt uncomfortably familiar, please like this video. It tells the algorithm this story matters. And if you enjoy real, emotional, life-changing stories about family, betrayal, resilience, and self-respect, subscribe to the channel. New stories are uploaded regularly, and each one is crafted to stay with you long after it ends. You might be one of the first subscribers, and I genuinely appreciate you being here early. You don't owe anyone your silence. You don't owe anyone your suffering, and you don't need permission to choose peace. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being here, and I'll see you in the next story.